Welcome back to another episode of the Maturity Project. I'm your host, Chad Everett Broshears, coming to you, well, maybe live, maybe not live, at the moment here from Largo, Florida. Uh, so, anyway, Maturity Project's about 8 different areas of maturity that help us develop a fulfilling life. The descriptions and on the main channel if you're interested in finding out more about each one of the areas, or just subscribe and you'll hear about them on a regular basis. And you can use these videos to get your day started, or when you're feeling a slump in your day, why not give yourself an opportunity to kind of think from a different perspective. The goal that I have is not just to mature ourselves, but to use development in the way of thinking and about thinking through our different situations and coming up with new potential outcomes, or just different thought processes to get us out of where we feel stuck or where we feel inefficient. Develop along the way, 8 different areas of maturity, right? So I wanted to talk more today. By the way, everything about this channel is failing up. I'm not the professional level where I've got a ridiculous production and I spend hours on end editing every video, things like that. You can hear, I've got stuff going on in the background. I'm just, you work with what you got and then you continue to go towards what you want to achieve, right? So conversations that continues to just be very relevant. I can't go onto any social media and see people you know not post about relationships. It's constant, always seeing things about relationships, about how people can't find good person, that person, their person, a good one, whatever. Turn on YouTube and you've got all these different podcasts that talk about the L's in dating, right? The losses or losers in dating. It's just it's constant. So there's a problem here. And us as a society, we're going the wrong direction, because if you want a fulfilling relationship, where we're going is not that. Everyone's relationships, and even including friendships, work colleagues, all these different types of relationships are becoming more and more disposable. But I'm more centering in on the intimate type, the boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife type of situation. That's more what I'm discussing today. But in general, just relationships in general, really, we don't really have a whole lot of fulfilling ones as a overall as a community. So, with that, I often do tell people, don't find the right person, be the right person. Develop yourself to be the right person. But I'm also seeing a very high consistency of people that are sticking around in a relationship because they just don't want to be alone, or there's some sort of payoff, or there's something that brings them satisfaction about that relationship, but it could be that it's just the fact that it's chaos. I've got a friend of mine that's stuck in that loop where commonly you find people that'll score higher on the narcissistic scale, that will use specific tools to disarm the person that they're with, or the people in their life, specifically the ones they're with intimately. They'll disrupt their life, they'll create uncertainty, they'll do a lot of things that just cause a lot of challenges that cause the person to question their own reality. So, and then the abuse patterns that they get familiar with become addictive. They become something that they don't know why they constantly find they're seeking it. And I'm like, well, it's a lot like, when you're like, I smoked for 6 years when I was younger, and the cigarette was no longer bringing me any kind of value other than just getting the urge to have a cigarette, or the addiction off my back was to have one. So at least it alleviated the discomfort of not having it. So, and that's what a lot of these relationships are like. It's like trying to break an addiction, even if it is one that there's little to no joy in. I mean, I've even asked this one person in particular, I'm like, well, what is it? Even down to the superficial level. Is it that the sex is that satisfying? Are they funny? What is the attribute that you continue to find yourself seeking with this person? And the reply is, I don't know. So we explored a little bit further. And by the way, I'm not a therapist. That's not my intention for this. It's just a maturity project. I'm all about the direction of maturity. I love to read. I love to learn. I'm all about just growth, failing up, and just continuing to pursue your goals. And it's make it a relentless pursuit. You've got every day ahead of you. May as well take those days and turn them into something, right? Like however many days you specifically have, may as well work towards your goals, so at least you know what it's like to be there, versus just surviving. So anyway, we're talking through this, and I ask her, you know, several questions to just understand what her reward process is for her being involved with these people or this particular person. And I was like, I wonder if it's a lot like trying to quit smoking or a drug addiction. Well, if you have never quit smoking or have a drug addiction that you can relate to, it's kind of hard to give that a definitive yes or no. So, experientially, probably no, because they haven't been through it. So, but as I described it a little bit more, I was like, does it feel to you like people describe a drug addiction? And she said, yeah, actually, that seems perfectly aligned. It's something that I know is not good for me, and something that constantly weighs on me. And I feel completely like shook up and destabilized whenever this person's around. You know, and I don't know how to say no to this person. I don't want them in my life, but I can't say no. I'm like, okay, well, whoever she was prior to meeting this person, it's changed her. And now she's got that feeling of what the addiction's like, and it makes her very, um, she's a prime candidate for abuse cycles and relationships. The crappy thing about it is when those types of relationships are going on, it can create a degree of excitement. You know, even though it's not the excitement like going to a theme park, it's still excitement. There's still this, the nervous system is stimulated to respond to an outside stimulus, and the body gets very used to that stimulation, so then it has the pattern it's familiar with. If she gets into the relationship with a person that she would describe as being the perfect guy, there's a pretty good chance she'll get bored with him. That'll feel like something's missing. Constantly like, well, if I get that, that one little hit, so if this particular guy were to come back in town and she's in a relationship with the ideal person, there's a possibility she would meet with this person and potentially damage or destroy the relationship she's in, the one of her dreams. Because the longer we're with a particular person that doesn't line up with us, or that isn't the person that we want in our life long term, you adopt, I mean, we do this all the time no matter what. You're adopting patterns and behaviors that are associated with the way you treat the person in your life, and the way that you're treated, and the way you think towards that person. The science of neuroplasticity will give you an idea about the patterns that we think by, which become, the more frequently we use those patterns, the easier it is to use them. The very simplistic and probably a poor description of neuroplasticity, but by all means, please look it up if you're interested in learning more. I'm not telling you I'm the expert. I just love to read, I love to learn, and I encourage people to help me learn, teach me, bring things to the channel that can help with this, that can continue to develop and mature us all. That's my goal. So, um, so building these patterns become frequent and common, to the point that it starts to take on our character, our personality, our character starts to take on some specific attributes of that, and it could change our character altogether. So if you're sticking around in the relationship because you really just want to get, the CDs back, as a Dane Cook joke that I've used in a previous video. I really don't like this person. They make me miserable and all this, but yeah, I got my CD case in their vehicle, and I'll go through another 2 or 3 years of hell just until I get those back. I know CDs are outdated and nobody's really sticking around for that anymore, especially after the CD burning era. But point of it is, now we get MP3s, rest of that nonsense. But it's still sticking around for something that isn't exactly what you want, and how that could change your personality. I know that as me personally, and I can speak from this directly, is when I've gone through multiple different high level challenges in my life, like something that really shakes you, something that gets you to your foundation, I've never come back as the person I was before I got into it. I didn't come back as the guy that was naive to it, or the guy that did not have those experiences and the hardships. So even the diamond doesn't come back as the coal, right? Once it's become a diamond, it's a diamond. Um, the goal is to do everything you can to become the precious thing that doesn't carry all the baggage that the past had. And through the experience of that transition, through the hardships you've gone through, the goal is not to collect new hardships, but to allow life to become, to provide the bounty of wisdom. As you go through things, if you choose to thrive through them, which means you're learning through the process what got you there, where you're currently at, and who you are authentically to yourself and with all sincerity, and then who you're becoming, keeping that aligned with your goals. And I would say having a category type of goal versus down to the fine-tuned detail, because the person that wrote the fine-tuned detail about your goals doesn't know enough about the goal in order to make that kind of detailed outlook. So it's better to make it more categorical. I want to be wealthy. Well, what does that mean? How much money do you need? Specifically, what's wealthy? Give me the what's your finish line? Or what's the achievement line where you sit back and go, I'm wealthy now. You got to have details enough to at least say, hey, this is it. Now what? You know, or you can get drunk on the madness of progress, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Although using madness as a descriptor could be that you become destructive in your life because all you want is the progress. I've been through that phase too. One of my previous relationships, that was a case for it. I was so driven for growth. It doesn't matter what I go through in this relationship, no matter how chaotic it could be, or how challenging it could be. I'm all in, man. Let's go. And it's just like, wow. Talking about like getting injections of stress, it was wild. But I learned a lot, and that's more or less that's how I'm built now. I've made myself into somebody that will find a way of thriving through the stress. So, anyway, if you're in a relationship you're not happy in, first off, you're in the relationship. The other person's in it too, but you have your autonomy, you have your choice. No matter how much you feel like you don't have a choice, you still have your choice. Now, what is that relationship conditioning you by? What's the consistency of the emotional experience? What are you having? Are you miserable the majority of the time? What happens if somebody's miserable the majority of the time? Being miserable becomes the easy default place. And then what comes with the default place of misery is the thoughts that are helping to perpetuate that. Something that helps you hold it in place. So misery likes like emotions. Not misery loves, identical company. Misery likes company. Misery likes upset. Misery likes, pain of emotional pain. Misery likes the undesirable side of emotions, not the other side, which is where you're happy and gleeful and really, jovial, right? It's not that. So they don't mix well, like oil and water. So if you stay in the relationship for a long time and you're not happy a lot of the time, the drawback is that your personality will start to reflect that, even if you feel like you're hiding it. You're not really hiding it. You're hiding it temporarily, and you might be able to convince people temporarily, but people that have known you for a long time eventually realize you're miserable, and they may not share with you how miserable you are because they just would rather let you figure it out and sort it out. I've had a friend that was also in a situation like that when she was thinking about leaving her husband, and she had told her sister that she was going to leave her husband, and her sister opened up almost as if the floodgates were released, going, my God, thank God you've mentioned something. We've, the family and I have realized how unhappy you've been for a very long time. And these are the ways that we realized that you were unhappy. And went through a list of like how she would behave around them. And, it just didn't seem like she was really that engaged in her marriage. And what it was about it, they've already sought out counseling and did all kinds of things. And she was just very upset, not happy. And people closest to her realized that. But it was also changing her on a different level. So she acted out as well. People typically do that too. You figure out how you act out. It may not be through, having another relationship or, infidelity or something like that. Your acting out might be reaching for something that's a coping mechanism like alcohol or drugs or, behaviors that are harmful to you. Even exercise can become harmful if you don't do it in the right balance. You can overtrain, and if you have other elements about your well-being, like you don't eat right, you don't sleep right, you don't drink enough water, you have kind of an undesirable or kind of a body burden type lifestyle that just puts a lot of burden on your body, well, that can prematurely age you, which means it can make you even more miserable and lead to other issues. So you have to make a choice. Right? Now you can choose to correct the relationship you're in, but often that's just the patterns are set so well they're so well established that going against them is like trying to stop a freight train in your bare feet. It's not going to be a task that's going to be something that it may damage you more than even realizing whether or not you're slowing the train down. By the time it actually comes to a stop, you may be nothing but a bloody mess of hand, and it's just your hands hanging on. It may have ground you out completely, trying to stop that process because it's so well established in you those patterns are so well established in the relationship that there's a fight. Plus, if the other person's not enrolled in the changes, they're going to push back to try to keep things where they are, where they're workable. Even if it's dysfunctional, it still can be workable compared to not having it. Because you don't know what it's like not to be in that relationship if you've been in it for a long time. And it's a fear people do have. Some do have the fear of being alone. So sitting with yourself is a practice, right? That's why a lot of people don't meditate. So, all right. Short and gist of it is that we can, if you're in a relationship that isn't where you want it to be, work on it. You can take it somewhere else. If there are a lot of patterns and habits that are there that are well situated and structurally sound, they can be very challenging to change. Oh, people go and seek out counselors or therapists or somebody along the lines of that in order to help assist them. It's very hard for partners to listen to each other, and it's incredibly challenging, near impossible for coaches to coach each other. So for two people that may be coaches by profession, very hard for them to coach each other. I've actually never seen it functionally happen and with actual real long-term beneficial results. But I can be corrected on any of this stuff and meet somebody that actually does that. But a lot of times what I've experienced with people do have that proclamation. It's really delusional, but I'm not saying that they're intentionally delusional or anything like that to be a negative or a slight. It's more of they're just in the fishbowl and they can't realize that actually this isn't very successful. You two have just convinced yourself for different reasons that it's successful. Not a counselor like that either, guys and gals. No, it's just think. It's just that's it. Put out some thoughts. If you're not sure where to go, what to do, obviously you can subscribe to the channel. You can send me an email. I do have a relationship course that you could, be a part of. If you'd like to take something that actually advances the process and gives you more insight, foundation, things like that, I do have a course for it. Send me an email at yourmaturityproject@gmail.com. That's YOUR maturityproject@gmail.com. I'll put the email in the description as well, so you can use that as an easy link if you choose to. You could also pick up books, read a little bit, even if it's not a lot. If you're not used to reading, read a little bit. Pick several pages a day. Before you know it, one, you're going to want to read more after a particular period of time. Fail up with me, guys. When I make those mistakes, screw it. Let's go with it and have fun with it. Like the tripping over my tongue. But yeah, pick some books. I can obviously offer some book options as well and things to look into if you're interested, but send me an email and I can get you some suggestions there. But yeah, just do something different than you did yesterday if you want tomorrow to be different, right? If you want change, you have to do something different. You can't just want it. You've got to take action. Knowledge is not power without action. Knowledge without action is just trivial. So it's good for trivia night, but I like to live in the real world, and I don't want to wait till Tuesday night at B-dubs to go do trivia, or wherever, however, whatever. So yeah, look, my goal is this: just to get people to think. Just think. I'm not saying everything that I say is 100% right. I like to research a lot. I do like to actually be involved as much as I can to figure out the things that are true. I don't like to hold on to old ideas that aren't true. Here's one for you. Fail up, right? Here's one. I actually fell for the urban legend. It's the BS, really, is what an urban legend is typically. It's just BS. It's just a story that circulates around that really isn't true, or oftentimes is not true. And I believed, here's a little confession for you, that Forrest Gump was a real person. Now, mind you, when the movie came out, that little urban legend started circulating, saying that he was a real person, and he made Bubblegum Shrimp Company, Bubblegum Shrimp Company. No, it's not true. But I didn't think to research it because that movie came out. Let's see, it was back in the 90s, so I was a teenager when it came out. And never did I think to actually look into whether or not it was true or not. I was caught up in other things at the time, and I kind of just set that on the shelf of being true. So yeah, we learn. The best thing to do is just have some fun with it. I never claim to be the smartest person in the room. That's one thing about me. I usually push back at people when they tell me that I'm really smart. I usually push back and say I'm not that smart. I'm just very, very curious. I really like to know things. I like to understand things. I like to learn. Learning is a passion of mine. So, uh, with that, think. Break free of your old patterns of thinking if you want something different. If how you feel right now in the relationship that you're in is, if your feelings or your actions are something you don't want your future self to have, you have to do something now in order to change that. Otherwise, if you let this continue, it will become who you are. To whatever version that is, it will become it. Like I've said, I have not come back from those major life experiences. By the way, you know, I hadn't come back the way I went into it. You have probably heard people say that when this person, like let's say somebody goes off to war, they never really came back. You may hear that, right? I know I've heard that many times. Somebody goes to war and then when they come back, they never really returned. Like something about them still where they were deployed, or something about them still where in the military or in the service, they never really came back. Well, on personal levels where we go through some incredibly challenging times, you can choose which direction you want to go in. Do you want to come back as partially absent or avoidant to something where you just shut down, or come back in somebody that, you've got three choices here. You can come back as somebody that avoids whatever that thing was that was chaotic and traumatic to them. You can come back to survive, which means you kind of lose who you are at the moment that thing gets active, or you don't have as many choices, you just survive through it. Or you can come back as a person that thrives. The one that preaches the majority of the wisdom in life are the one that choose to thrive more often, because they learn lessons, and they learn lessons fairly well when you thrive. I've talked about that as well as three different models when it comes to how do you handle challenges, and that's avoidance, surviving, and thriving. So those three different categories, and there's models to that, how you deal with chaos and conflict. So with this, you have to choose when you go through those types of relationship challenges, those traumatic experiences, is what model am I going to work through with this? If you're overwhelmed and you just feel like you can't handle it, you're probably going to just avoid as much as you can. There will be times you don't have a choice. You can do everything you want, but life is not going to let you avoid it. Then there'll be times that, you're just going to have to survive through those, right? Like when that stuff comes up, you can't avoid it, you're going to have to survive through it. And it's going to be even more traumatic, most likely, especially if you're forced through something you're trying to avoid. So surviving can be a very traumatic experience in that. Thriving is when you look at what got you there, by the way you think, the decisions you made, who you were at the time, what you were actually after, what you wanted to experience, if you made any concessions in order to, uh, um, concessions to make an agreement in order to make that thing work at the time. It can come back to haunt you and often does. Uh, so thriving gives you access to that, so you can say, oh, I understand. And next time something like this comes up where I had made that concession before in order to keep the peace or make something work, maybe I was too scared to say whatever I wanted to say because I felt like I was going to lose something, or find some sort of harm in some way, or abandonment, or whatever it might be. Then you made the concession, and then the outcome is, that's the outcome. You have the hardship that turned into this other thing that is a lot worse because you didn't have the courage to face it then. And I'm not calling anybody a coward to be, negative, or to be an asshole about it. But at the same time, the reality of the definition is cowardice. Whenever you don't use courage, and the time calls for courage, cowardice is the other option. So it's up to you. What do you do with those types of moments? Uh, Don't let the relationship that you're currently in change you to the negative if you don't want that to happen. Now, one caveat to this: the negative can prepare you on how to survive whenever everything gets hard, but you still have to choose that development. So, I'm not saying just believe in rainbows and fairy tales and unicorn farts and candy cane and all the rest of that, or cotton candy. I'm not saying that. You have to make the choices that you want that suit you best for the long term as well as your current situation. That's the ideal Goldilocks, is the current situation and long term are both lined up to what you would desirably want. and you might have to stick it through something you're dealing with right now in order to achieve that. So, but you have to set out for that being a destination. So this life is truly yours to have. If you don't want to really change it in a way that makes it the most rewarding, personal mantras really won't make much of a difference. You can say it to yourself all day long, positive vibes only, or whatever other statements the yoga pants wearing tribe likes to put out there. Not knocking you guys and gals, predominantly gals. I know you bust your ass so that you can drink your wine, and wear your yoga pants or whatever it is. It's your thing. And again, I'm not out to knock it. I'd like to make light of a little bit, like a little levity moment. All right, you choose. I just say try not to choose delusion as much as you can. But sometimes we choose delusion, don't realize we are. But that's the purpose of this. It's one of the purposes of this, is to help us understand how to mature ourselves and to realize some of these things that we hear them, but we don't really emotionally get them. And there is a difference there. You hear quotes, you hear statements that kind of like, they break generations because they keep being stated by multiple generations. And you've heard it so many times. The reason why it doesn't land, you cognitively get it, but you forget it fairly easily until hindsight shows up and goes, oh, that's what they mean. The reason why you're able to access it in that situation where somebody says something, and they're like, oh, I've heard this a million times, like a quote or something like that. And you're like, I don't really understand what that, like I thought I knew what it meant. But now in hindsight, with the thing that I went through, I have this emotional, amount of information that I got this emotional data that's telling me, yeah, you got it, but you didn't have any idea what the hell you got. You didn't understand what the person that stated it the first time really meant. Like they say, be careful what you wish for. It's one of them. Or don't find the one, be the one. Don't wait for the perfect person to show up, become the perfect person, right? Like those kind of statements. It doesn't have to be a negative. It can be, oh, I get it now. Like you put in the work to become that better person, the person that is closer to your goals, that may be, well developed in a way that becomes more attractive to other people in relationship settings. Be the person that you want to date. Don't find the person that you want to date. It's when you become that person, you become more of a beacon. You're demonstrating to other people that you have specific attributes and characteristics that are desirable in that way. And then other people that are deserving, right? You'll get the friend referral where they're like, my God, I have the perfect friend for you. A lot of times that's because they've aligned. They see your character, they see your personality. It's not just the fact that you may be single or you're going to be single soon or whatever. It's the fact of how you behaved, and that gives that, desire to share that information with you, which maybe that person is the ideal person. Who knows? But when you are the person you want to date, you have more access to that versus just going around telling everybody the kind of person you want to date. I love it, and I also at the same time it's incredibly sad. But you see this modern movement where you see people on the street where they're asking questions about what kind of women or like what kind of guys women are after, and what kind of guy do you want to date? Well, he's got to be over 6 feet. He's got to have 6 figures. Like he's got to be the trifecta of 6. Whatever. It's like, okay, you have a lot of demands. What did you do in order to be the person that person would want to be with? If you think genetically you're just showing up because you're God's gift to everyone, then you're going to be in probably the tender category. If they show you attention, it's probably going to be the kind of attention they don't let their friends know they're showing you. You might be the moped if you want to go that route. I don't mean to be crass, but yeah. Let's just get to work on ourselves. Be the person you want to date, and if you're in a situation or a relationship that continues to, give you the regular, repeated enough, emotional influence, be careful. It's not just momentary. Your thinking will align with it over time. You'll think your way through it to survive it. You'll figure out how to fight against it and how to have fights. If you're not used to fighting somebody or having fights in a relationship, you may get used to having fights in a relationship because you have to learn how to defend yourself because you hadn't had to before, and now you do because you're in that relationship. And those traits, once you develop them, they don't like to go to bed quietly. Same, God. Now I won't add that in right now. I'm just going to talk about retirement. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'll use this as an example, then I'll close up for the day, for this episode. So when people work their entire lives, the average lifespan last that I read with men when they retire is 3 years. But I think it's actually 3.5 years is the lifespan for the average man after they retire. So they retire 65, and then they're dead by 68, 69. And the reason for it is because if you don't have purpose, you don't have something to associate value with as far as purpose in life, which is the 8th area of maturity, purpose, spirituality. Uh, anyway, it's spirituality / purpose. So it's whichever one best describes you, but they both kind of pretty much come to the same conclusion. So if you don't have something to apply those skills to, then those skills can get restless. And you can say, you know what? I've worked my entire life. I was on time. I developed these skill sets. I did all these things. Those things don't like to just sit around doing nothing. So if you don't have a really strong hobby that can occupy your time and give you something that seems like a work requirement, like taking up playing golf or pickleball or whatever it is, having a community exposure and responsibilities, taking up charities, things like that, people that actually take up new responsibilities, they have longer lifespans than the people that don't. Those traits do not like to go to bed easy, and they don't like to be ignored. So they start rising up again, and then you get frustrated, and you're like, well, damn it. Especially for people on Social Security, they know they can't go back to work, because if they do go back to work, they can only make so much money, and if they make more than that, they start taking it away from their Social Security. It's a screwed up system. So, yeah, got a lot of problems there. But that's not the point of this video. The point of it is that you have these skills that you developed for so long, now they don't want to leave you. Same thing in those relationships. You develop those skills for so long that are the surviving skills. I'm not just going to get beat up in this relationship. I'm going to defend myself. I don't mean domestic violence, although sometimes that happens. I mean more of when somebody argues with you, you fight back, right? You argue back. So that's what I mean. So you develop those skills. They don't like to go to bed. So when you do meet somebody that seems to be the most ideal person, you've developed yourself with degrees of chaos, and this other person doesn't have that. And those skills don't like to just go to bed quietly. They'll come up eventually. It should show up like, I don't get it. I don't know what's wrong. There's really nothing wrong. Everything seems perfect in this relationship, but yet something seems wrong. I don't know what it is. That can very easily be those traits that are coming up to the surface going, I need to be exercised. Cause havoc. I need to thrive. I need to get out and to justify my existence. Your history doesn't like to be forgotten, basically. So, emotional history. Anyway, all right, that's it for today. Share this video with the people in your life that you'd like to make a meaningful conversation with. Get started on making a change, and you could do that one person at a time. If you got something out of today's video, put it in the comment section. If you haven't already done this before, you know the routine. Subscribe to the channel, like it, help it with the algorithm, because that does help out a lot. Comments also help out a lot. Now, I'm not saying I'm the arbiter of truth. I'm not the guy that knows everything. I'm incredibly curious to learn as much as possible. We do have a channel, like a show now that we also do plan to be recorded at least once a week, every week. That'll be myself and guests, where we sit down and we talk about different things. The last episode we did this it was a couple of days ago, and it had to do with the Hak Tui girl and ethical capitalism. And we went through several different conversation perspectives with that. So if you have interest in that, subscribe to the channel. You'll know when they go live, whenever those videos go up. But also, if you have strong areas of maturity, you would like to share something that you feel can contribute to the community that's growing here, by all means, you can put a comment in the comment section, or you can send me an email to yourmaturityproject@gmail.com, yourmaturityproject@gmail.com. And there's a good chance you may be invited to the show. We just have to have a couple conversations and see how well that goes. But I am taking in guests as well. I don't know everything, and I'll never say that I do. I really want to learn, and I'd like to be able to bring that passion and desire to learn to this so that we can develop ourselves along the way and create more of a fulfilling experience in life. As I tell the people in my life that I know directly, that my goal is to help them realize who I see them to be. And I typically see people's greatness. A lot of times we are just too humble, or we just don't believe in ourselves enough to actually see it. So that's something that I set out with, and I do this actively, especially with the people that join the show. I let them know how I see them and who they are to me. So if we start a fashion of that, if we make that fashionable, we really could turn this entire thing around, where people start to show more empathy and less desire to, survive. By the way, I look at narcissistic traits and behaviors as somebody's desperate attempt to survive. Um, but where did it start, and what's built around it over the years? And then we end up with the traits that we can identify now and go, I don't know how that's helped to survive. That person's just an asshole. It goes long term, and it can be generational. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'm your host, Chad Everett Broshears. Path to hell is paved with good intentions. We're not doing that here at the Maturity Project. So we're going to create something great. We're doing it together. So until next time, we grow through with what we go through. Yesterday's failures can be and will become tomorrow's success. All right, until next time, let's get up to something. Let's get up to it together. All right, see ya.